Afternoon, colleagues, and this is meeting number 49 of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, Monday, March 20th, 2017. And I would remind everyone today that our committee is televised, so if you could turn your communication devices down or off or mute them, and that goes for those in the audience, that would be greatly appreciated. I also want to welcome, before we begin, in the audience today, a representation of the Public Accounts Committee of Kenya. And we look forward as a committee to meeting with you after, but certainly we welcome you here today. You're accompanied by Secretary of the High Commission, Mr. Ifange, and it's good to have you here with us. Today we are studying report number 2, Income Tax Objections, Canada Revenue Agency of the Fall 2016 Reports of the Auditor General of Canada. Appearing as witnesses we have today from the Office of the Auditor General of Canada, Ms. Nancy Cheng, Assistant Auditor General, and Monsieur Jean Goulet, Principal. Also from Canada Revenue Agency, we have Mr. Bob Hamilton, Commissioner of Revenue and Chief Executive Officer, and Muriel Laroche, Assistant Commissioner, Appeals Branch. I understand that each of our witnesses today has an opening statement before we turn to questions from members of Parliament on our committee. And so I would invite Ms. Chung to proceed with an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Monsieur le Président, je vous remercie de nous donner l'occasion de présenter.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank you for giving us this opportunity to present our report on income tax objections. Joining me at the table is Jean Goulet, who is the principal responsible for the audit. This audit focused on whether the Canada Revenue Agency efficiently managed personal and corporate income tax objections. A taxpayer can file an objection if the taxpayer disagrees with the agency's assessment of an income tax return. The agency must provide an impartial and timely review of a taxpayer's objection. If not satisfied with the agency's decision on the objection, the taxpayer can appeal to the courts.
The agency processed roughly 30 million income tax returns worth about $235 million in income taxes. During that time, taxpayers filed almost 67,000 objections that put $4.8 billion in income taxes into dispute. As of 31st March 2016, the agency had close to 172,000 objections outstanding, worth over $18 billion in income taxes. To assess the efficiency of the objection process, we look at the time the agency took to provide taxpayers with decisions on their objections. We also examined the various stages in the process to identify where delays occurred. Our audit found that the agency took too long to decide if a taxpayer's objection was right. We found that the agency took about 5 months to settle straightforward objections, which made up about 60% of files. For medium complexity objections, the agency told taxpayers they could wait up to a year before hearing from an appeals officer. And 79,000 cases, worth almost $4 billion in income taxes, took the agency 5 or more years to resolve. During the 5-year period covered by our audit, we found that 65% of the time, the agency ruled in whole or in part in favor of the taxpayer. When the taxpayer pays upfront, and the agency takes a long time to rule in favor of the taxpayer, costs are incurred not just for the taxpayer involved, but also for the economy as a whole. Nous avons aussi examiné les cibles.
We also examined the Canada Revenue Agency's performance targets for the objection process and found that the agency did not consider timeliness from the point of view of the taxpayer. For example, the agency did not count the days that it took to assign files to appeals officers. This means that the time to decide on objections reported by the agency was much shorter than the time taxpayers actually waited. Without complete and accurate information on the time the agency takes to process an objection, taxpayers have no way of knowing how long they will have to wait for a decision. Furthermore, the agency has no way of knowing if it is getting better or worse at meeting its mandate for timely review of objections.
Overturned either by the agency's objection process or by the courts on appeal may signal issues with either the original assessment or the agency's subsequent reviews. We found that the agency did not adequately use the information coming out of its own decisions or of those of the tax court to learn and improve its processes and performance. We made 8 recommendations to the Canada Revenue Agency. The agency agreed with all of them and has committed to taking corrective action. Mr. Chair, this concludes my opening remarks. We'd be pleased to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And we now welcome Mr. Hamilton. Commissioner, welcome to this committee.
OK, merci, Monsieur le Président. C'est un honneur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's an honor to appear before the committee in my capacity as Commissioner of the Canada Revenue Agency. I'm accompanied today by Mireille Laroche, Assistant Commissioner, Appeals Branch. She is responsible for the objections program.
Months in the job, I've had the opportunity to visit all of our regional operations, and I can attest to the pride and the professionalism and the commitment of CRA's employees. Together, we work to improve the service to Canadians, combat tax evasion and avoidance, and provide a fair and equitable administration of Canada's tax and benefit systems. These responsibilities are challenging, and yet they're essential, and Canadians count on us to deliver our programs in a fair and trusted manner. The objections program is an important part of ensuring fairness in the administration of Canada's tax laws. Through impartial reviews, it provides a resolution process when taxpayers disagree with the CRA decision. Mr. Chair, as the Auditor General pointed out in his fall 2016 report, the CRA has been facing some challenges with respect to resolving objections in a timely manner. We have taken these findings seriously, we have accepted the 8 recommendations, and we have been actively implementing solutions to them. Avant de présenter notre stratégie relative au
Before outlining our objections program strategy and early results, I will highlight the agency's overall performance in administering individual and corporate income tax laws. Every year, the CRA conducts roughly 66 million assessments and compliance activities, including 31 million personal and corporation income tax returns. Only 0.1% of these, or about 66,000 files, are the subject of an objection. Of those objections, 8% involve an alleged misapplication of laws, facts, or policies by the CRA. The agency takes great pride in quality decisions and service to Canadians.
improvement, especially in the area of timeliness and reporting to Canadians, and that's our first priority. Our strategy to address the Auditor General's recommendations and provide better service to Canadians revolves around 4 themes. First, communication with taxpayers. Second, reducing the inventory of files. Third, service standards and reporting. And fourth, learning from objections and appeal decisions. On communications, Mr. Chair, our first theme is communication with taxpayers. We have recently developed a comprehensive strategy to ensure that we communicate clearly with taxpayers about their tax obligations and objections process. This has been an area where we haven't performed as well as we'd like in the past, having that clear communication with taxpayers. In November 2016, the CRA website was updated to explain our categorization of low, medium, and high complex cases, how to resolve typical tax issues, such as how to submit new or additional information, and how to request an adjustment rather than file an objection, how to object and under what circumstances, the need to provide all supporting documentation with an objection to speed up resolution of the issue, the date of files currently being assigned by complexity level. Historically, the agency has not shared its timelines for resolving objections with taxpayers. However, as of April 1st of this year, very shortly, we will publish on our website a new service standard for low complexity objections and the actual time it takes to resolve low complexity objections. We will also amend our acknowledgement letters to provide taxpayers with a clear understanding of how long it might take for them to receive a decision. The second area is reducing the inventory of files. We are looking to reduce our inventory of approximately 166,000 objections. This includes two types of objections. The first is regular files, which are comprised of distinct objections from individuals or businesses. The second is group files, which are comprised of objections sometimes involving thousands of taxpayers who participated in tax avoidance arrangements or are disputing common issue. And this issue of the inventory is very important for us as we try to address how we can provide better service, because at the moment, each new one that comes in gets added onto the inventory. We have to find a way to not only serve people who are giving us new objections, but to take the inventory down over time. On the group objections, an example of this kind of tax avoidance is a gifting tax arrangement where taxpayers receive a donation receipt that is for a greater amount than the actual cash donation. Group files represent 55% of our inventory. Due to the potential number of related objections, these files can unexpectedly increase our workload. Group files are also treated differently than regular files due to the involvement of the courts to process them efficiently and consistently. Lead cases are identified and the related objections are put on hold until the court's final decision is rendered and applied to them. This process can take years. Once a decision is made, the CRA uses a streamlined process to resolve group objections, but we must divert some of our resources from the regular objections workload to do so. This has had an adverse effect on our overall performance. The CRA is prioritizing the reduction of regular objections inventory, which is composed of varying complexities and issues. As we develop our action plans, we are consulting government departments and other tax administrations that have faced similar inventory challenges and trying to incorporate their best practices. In line with the Auditor General's recommendation, we are also conducting a series of reviews to identify areas with potential to reduce delays. For example, on April 1st of this year, we will introduce a new process for low complexity objections, which represent about 60% of our annual intake. In the past, taxpayers were contacted only after an objection was assigned to an appeals officer. If information was missing, even more time was required to resolve the file. With our new process, taxpayers or their representatives will be contacted within 30 days of filing an objection to solicit any missing information. This way, files are complete and ready to be worked on once assigned to an officer. This will result in a more timely resolution process. Automation and specialization of work will create further efficiencies and maximize resources, which will help us provide more timely service to Canadians. It won't happen overnight, but we are already making some progress to reduce the inventory of files and improve timelines on new objections. Thanks to funding from Budget 2016 and some internal processing improvements, we're on track to resolve more objections in 2016-17 than initially predicted. But there's much more to do. Our third theme is service standards and reporting. Mr. Chair, as I mentioned, we are introducing a new service standard for low complexity objections. That is to resolve them within 180 days, 80% of the time. This standard reflects the fact that we have an aging inventory. As progress is made to reduce that inventory, the standard will be resolved for more timely resolution. Au cours du prochain exercice,
we will be implementing the potential work that relates to this period involving the opposition files under the control of the Government of Canada. The members of the committee will be able to be sure that our standards will correspond to the actual time periods involved. Our fourth and last objective relates to the lessons learned from these oppositions and appeals. Although it does respect its commitment to give impartial treatment, it is essential to apply the lessons that we have learned from these oppositions and appeals to other sectors of the agency that process these tax returns and carry out credit examinations.
Information on the outcome of objections, including why an objection was allowed in part or in full. For example, we had successful results from the feedback loop related to the disability tax credit that led to a significant decrease in objections in 2016-17 and an increase in the percentage of assessments confirmed. This issue of the feedback loop and learning lessons from what has happened is a key part of our plan going forward. We haven't in the past always done as good a job of making sure that we are incorporating the lessons we learn in one part of the agency to another. So we'll be focusing on this as we go forward. So in closing, Mr. Chair, the transformation of the objections program, coupled with other improvements resulting from Budget 2016 investments, will enable us to respond to the issues identified by the Auditor General in his report. By doing so, we will provide Canadians with better and more timely service. We have an action plan to address those concerns. We will be implementing it aggressively, and also we'll be learning lessons along the way as we try to find even better ways to provide better service to Canadians and a fairer appeals process. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hamilton. And also, I just want to thank you for coming. To be quite honest, for appearing. We have on a number of occasions made requests of deputy ministers or those who are responsible for the department to appear, and many times we have levels much lower than deputies appear, and we do thank you for coming and for being in this role for such a short period and yet appearing before this committee. We'll now move to Madame Mendez. She has 7 minutes.
Which I will be sharing with my colleague, Mr. Lefebvre. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for being here, and I'll second our chair's comments on your presence. Madam Chang, it's a pleasure to see you again. You know, I'm encouraged to hear you, Mr. Hamilton, say of the many measures that you've started putting in place in response to the report. Somehow, I still have a few questions, and it goes very much to the general message the Auditor General expressed in his fall report about the government of Canada as a whole, the services offered by the government of Canada as a whole, being very much focused on the how and not the what we are delivering to Canadians. And as a citizen who has to deal with Revenue Canada like everybody else and has to pay taxes, I have to say that, you know, sometimes our dealings with Revenue Canada can be extremely hurtful, not just to say frustrating, but very hurtful. The feeling that you are always in the wrong when you deal with Revenue Canada, and in my added case with Revenue Quebec, which is another story. So, and I've never had anything gone wrong, just to give you the feeling that you have when you actually have to deal with the agency. So how do you approach that in a much more general sense for the agency, how Canadians feel when they have to deal with the agency?
Yes. Well, I think the first thing I would say of a general nature is that the minister has received a pretty clear mandate from the Prime Minister to improve service at the agency, the service that we provide to Canadians. And I think that while there have been occasions in the past where some people have felt the agency was not as sensitive, reasonable as they could be, I think for the most part, very proud of the employees. There's a vast number of people, over 40,000 people work in the agency that are really trying to serve Canadians as best they can. But it is true that there's room for improvement. And so that's the first thing that I would say overall. I'll come back to the overall point. In this particular example, I think one of the things as an example of how we're trying to change the focus of what we're doing, when we measured how long it took us to deal with an objection. We start the clock at one point and then we stopped it. And once it went outside of the appeals branch, we stopped the clock. Because the appeals branch wasn't in control of it at that point, so in some sense there was a logic. But we've turned it, and if you think of it as from the taxpayer's perspective, taxpayer doesn't really care if it's in the appeals branch or somewhere else in government. So we'll be running the clock as long as government has control. And, if we go back to the taxpayer and need additional information, then that's fine. We can stop the clock for that purpose. So we're trying in our services here to think more about what works for the taxpayer, not just what works for us. It has to be a blend of both. And I think going back to your general point, we're trying to do that in all of the areas where we provide services. I think we've done some great things in terms of the electronic services that we provide. We've got new technologies to help the service for Canadians, but there are some places where we just need to improve, and we need to think more about how Canadians approach the tax system and how we communicate with Canadians. The tax system is a complicated beast, and sometimes we don't do everything we can to communicate effectively and explain it to people who may not understand it as well as we do. And so I think we're working on all of those avenues. We're working on improving our correspondence to make it a bit more clear, plain language. And I can attest as a taxpayer receiving my notice of assessment, there have been some recent improvements. But that's the kind of thing that we're focusing on. So that effort to think about the service from a Canadian's, the client's perspective is something that we're doing at the agency. But at the end of the day, I should just caveat that we have to collect the money that's owed, and sometimes those can be difficult conversations, but that doesn't mean we can't have them in a reasonable manner, and we will strive to do that.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Lefebvre.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How much time left?
You have 2 minutes.
No, thank you. Be very first part of my questions. Again, I will repeat, thank you for being here this afternoon. Just looking at the auditor's report, it says here that since 2005 to 2015, there was an increase of outstanding income tax objections of around 171%. So 171% the past 10 fiscal years outstanding income tax objections. And then, so my first question was why? Why is there, because this is very, very high. This is just not something, a blip over the years. There has to be an underlying reason. Before we can address how to resolve it, we have to ask why. Then I look at, again, at paragraph 232, management of growing inventory. It says here, the appeals branch of the Canada Revenue Agency had experienced steady growth in the number of taxpayer objections. Second sentence. Agency officials told us that the growth was a result of both the taxpayers' actions and the agency's own efforts to identify and reassess taxpayers who were not paying their fair share of income tax. So all of a sudden, 10 years ago, taxpayers started to learn that they had these rights to object, at the same time, in parallel, the CRA was doing a better job of identifying people with income tax. Is that the basis of the answer? Or is there more to this?
I think that covers a part of it. I might express it slightly differently, but I think, yes, there was a time when the agency started to focus more on auditing, certainly in the area of tax gifting shelters that I had mentioned earlier, so where people were engaged in avoidance activities.
Well, there was avoidance activities way back in the late 90s as well. There were all these yard flips and a lot of the tax shelters, a lot of the tax avoidance stuff was going on in the 90s as well.
Right. Well, there would always be avoidance activity, but the agency put additional resources into auditing those activities and cracking down, if I could use that term. And what that leads to, and this is another one of the lessons that I guess we're learning, is when you do that, either that activity increases or our auditing of that activity increases, you generate work for the appeals branch, because a high percentage of those cases typically would end up getting appealed.
Yep.
And so that activity, uncovering those, led to more appeals, and that was a factor, not the only one, but a big factor in that growth in the inventory.
Okay, I'll come back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lefebvre. I will now move to Mr. Abbott.
Well, that was just get started.
And welcome to the committee.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Commissioner, and the panelists today for attending before committee. Mr. Commissioner, we hear a lot about CRA and how CRA is treating taxpayers, or servant taxpayers, if you wish. And most of the letters we receive are negatives. And I've just found about 4 samples of letters. Some quotes came from taxpayers. I would like to read them, and hopefully we can get some good comments from you on all of them. One says, my tax filing have been audited for 2 consecutive years. though there was and is nothing dishonest or sneaky in either filing. My claims have already been accepted for 2014, and I've been waiting for 22 weeks now for a resolve of 2015 filing. A second one says, CRA agents with whom I've spoken are sometimes borderline rude or stressed to the point of hysteria. One agent told me that responding to a submission of service or service complaint can take a year or more, though the service standards on the CRA website claim that the CRA will respond to a submission within 8 weeks, 100% of the time. A third one says, in early 2014, I started to receive letters from CRA stating that I owed them approximately $230,000 in back taxes. This was an absurd amount of money. In 2015, the CRA forwarded to me all my T-slips for years 2008 through 2014, and when I completed my returns, my calculations showed that I owed the CRA approximately $26,000. Even with the interest and penalties, the amount could be nowhere close to $230,000. If the CRA had all my T-slips, how could there be about $200,000 difference in their assessment? What the CRA did was either an act of malice or negligence and was tantamount to harassment, bullying, and was a blatant use of intimidation tactics in order to carry out their mandate. The last one says all a CRA representative had to do was look at the return and the paperwork. It should have been a case solved, but instead of someone at the CRA simply looking at the paperwork, the threatening letter was sent to an 83-year-old woman who knows nothing of CRA, their workings, or the tax laws. It upset her, but in the end, 5 months later, it was solved. It all could have been avoided. So, Mr. Commissioner, every member of Parliament, I believe, received similar letters to this or to these. What are we supposed to tell our constituents who feel they are being bullied and harassed by the CRA? Thank you.
So I won't be able to respond to every individual case that you've raised, as you can imagine here. And I get some letters myself from taxpayers giving us feedback, and I'd have to be honest and say that more of them are negative than are positive. But I guess what I would say to people is that we are striving to provide better service. And a couple of the things that you have referred to are things that we are trying to do better, and really without responding to those cases, because there could be fact sets that I'm not aware of. But we are trying to make sure that where we have a piece of information from a taxpayer, we use it. There certainly have been examples in the past where in one part of the organization, somebody had information, but somebody else was dealing with a taxpayer and didn't have access to that information. So we're trying to fix that, try to think about the agency more as an integrated whole and connect the silos together. So that's one example where we could try to do a better job to make sure that we have the right information. Second thing is when we correspond with the taxpayer, making sure that that's respectful correspondence, and in some ways is helping to educate why are we doing what we're doing. And hopefully we won't make mistakes, but if we do, it could be uncovered in a way that's constructive and productive. And so we are trying to look at our correspondence, look at how we train people. And I would just say that, on behalf of the 40,000 people that work in the agency, the vast majority of cases are where we can actually help taxpayers. And I've sat in on calls with taxpayers where people who are on the other end are quite stressed because the tax situation is difficult. And our agents have been able to help them through that, to explain how if you're in financial hardship, there can be ways to get around it, or here's the explanation for it. So we can do a better job, and that is part of the service mandate that we are trying to push for our minister. And we can try to minimize the number of mistakes that we make. In a big organization with all of the returns that we process, there probably will always be, unfortunately, some cases, but we are actively trying to improve the service we provide using the best tools we can, intelligence and technology, and being sensitive in how we communicate.
Okay, well, thank you. We know that your clients are the taxpayers, so eventually, in a business sense, if we build a good relationship with the clients, definitely the operation will be more efficient and the investment will be less, rather just change course. So how happy being on the job for a few months, how happy are you with the culture of CRA, where I heard the minister claiming that it will be sort of a client-friendly agency, but the letters keep pouring our way, and we keep hearing the negativities all the way. So I hope that a change of culture will help the business to prosper and to be less costly, and the return on investment will be much quicker, and people will be less hassled. So how can you comment on that?
Yeah, the comment that I would make on that is we are looking at the service culture in the agency and doing quite a bit of work to see how we can improve, what we can learn from other jurisdictions and other operations. And the one thing that I've been focusing on is trying to make sure that that culture applies throughout the organization. So, for example, one could think of an auditor who, has a responsibility to get the taxes that are owed, but we've been communicating that those auditors have a role to play in providing service to Canadians as well. Yes, we want to get the taxes that are owed so that the tax is distributed fairly across all Canadians. But if we can have a respectful conversation with the taxpayer, and in some cases educate them as to why the tax system works this way and why we're doing, then I think we'll probably not only improve that transaction, but down the road there should be fewer problems, which I think is the point that you're making. If we can adopt that service culture, we may actually be helping ourselves getting the taxes that are owed to us as well. So trying to make sure that that's throughout the organization, across all regions of the country, and that's one of the things that in the few months that I've been on the job I'm trying to emphasize for people, and just communicate better internally and with taxpayers.
Thank you very much,
Thanks.
Mr. Hamilton, Mr. Aboutif. Mr. Christofferson, please, you have 7 minutes.
Very good. Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you to our guests for appearing today. Chair, with your indulgence, if I could just, at the beginning, just on behalf of all of us, welcome you back. We did at an earlier meeting we had that was an in-camera business meeting, but I think the kind of cooperation and team spirit that we have here in this committee warrants a public welcoming. You've been off sick with a fixable health issue.
That's right.
That is now fixed, and it's good to see you back in the chair. We're pleased to have you here, and hopefully all your health issues are now behind you. So
Knee
welcome,
replacement.
welcome back.
Knee replacement. It could have been worse.
All right, very good. Well, again, good to have you back, Chair.
Thank you.
If I might, just at the outset, to Mr. Hamilton, I have to say I was a little disappointed, and you missed an opportunity for a brownie point. Had you made a reference to data in your opening comments? And I say to colleagues, I think that's as much an indication of our failure as a problem for the department. We have been trying now for, 6, 8 months, maybe going better part of a year, at the urging of the Auditor General, to make data, information, accuracy, and completeness a priority. And so I was disappointed because it was one of the major recommendations, and it's an area that I'm going to focus on in my remarks. But I did want to say that I was a little disappointed that we haven't done a good enough job, that your advisors didn't make sure that you dropped something in here to make reference to sort of our pet project of the year, if you will. And we take it very seriously. So maybe a cautionary note to your colleagues, if they have others listening, to give that kind of advice to their presenters. Now, having said that, turning to the actual audit on this matter, and I'm looking at in the area of 2.58, if you want to go over there. Here's the thing. It's sort of the blatantness, if that's a word, of it. I'm going to quote, the Auditor General said, "We found that the data contained errors which hindered accurate performance measurement and reporting. We found that the agency's information system did not have sufficient controls in place to ensure data integrity. For example, it was possible to enter a date for completing an objection that preceded the date for receipt of the objection, and in such cases, the error was not flagged by the system." So, and just to continue to get it on the record, for some objections, the date recorded for receipt of the notice of objection followed the date of assessment to an appeals officer. For example, we found that 20,825 objections had invalid dates. That is, errors in date sequence, such as the assignment date preceding the mailing date. And just to set it up even sweeter, the next sentence in the beginning of 2.60 says, we found that some data fields in the database were blank, for example. So, give me some assurance, please, that you've got a major turnaround on the issue of data underway.
Yes. So I actually appreciate the question. Being an economist, having spent most of my career at the Department of Finance, there's nobody who loves data more than I do. So thank you for raising that. Indeed, it was a major criticism in the Auditor General's report. It's something that we have a fairly aggressive action plan to try to turn around, to try to correct some of the more obvious things that you have raised. I would describe the agency as having a wealth of data at its disposal. Sometimes we aren't able to share that data because it's taxpayer confidential, but in many ways we do a lot of great work with data. This is a place where we need to improve our data. And I can say that we have made some very, very significant improvements in a short time with what I would consider to be relatively straightforward steps. I mean, you identified some of the problems. So on the one hand, I'm encouraged by that, you know, a 41% increase in the data quality. On the other hand, I'm distressed by it because it shows how far we had to come, and you know we still have more to go. So I think you can rest assured that with us, and Mireille also is doing a lot of work with her colleagues across the agency, because this is another part where we have to get everybody in the agency contributing to the data set effectively and efficiently. And we will have better data, and we will communicate that data where we can better with Canadians. So I think your point is valid, and it's something we take with great interest.
Good to hear. Thank you. Now, before I move on to how we're going to fix it, though, I do want to just pursue a little further. Clearly, what we need is a culture change across government. And here is a perfect example of a culture change that needs to happen. When it's okay to leave blanks, there's a culture problem. Can you give me some idea how we could be at that point for an agency that deals in numbers also, that's your bread and butter, that they would actually leave fields blank? Help me understand how we could be so far away from the proper kind of data collection and analysis that you and I both know needs to be done. And I know you've only been there a few months, but I just can't leave this totally without pursuing a little more. How did we get to the point where there's a culture that exists where it can go from all the people whose hands it is in, and there are blank fields, and that was deemed to be okay? Help me understand that, sir.
Yeah, I'll probably ask my colleague Mireille Laroche to chip in if she can on that, because frankly I don't have a great explanation for blank fields. In my 7 months I haven't really uncovered that. The one thing I do know is that there were difficulties with the data entry in some cases. I think you mentioned things that happened before the file was received or after it was done. Blanks were there. We do have a data integrity program that we put in place to try to catch those.
How long has that been around, sir?
Well, I think it's been there for a while, but we've actually beefed it up to the point now where it's
so you
trying
had
to
one
catch
that didn't work
things.
very good.
The other one didn't work very well. Why didn't it? I don't know for sure, and I would ask Mireille if she could add to that, but I can give you the assurance that the new one we have, we will be paying attention to the data entries across the organization, verifying them, and hopefully, well, we will be improving the data. But is there anything you want to add?
Some of the issues of why some fields would be blank would be when the system allows you to make certain fields that are not mandatory and you can still process them. I would think that from an appeals officer or any officer, sometimes they want to expedite the process and they don't consider that as being mandatory, and therefore it's allowed. And it's true that impedes our ability to do some analysis and performance reporting in that regards. We had some data reporting activities before. We had reports. I would say that they were not truly effective in how we dealt with them, so we revamped them in December, and we're already seeing marked results because we're making our officers accountable for these mistakes, and they're changing it. And as Commissioner has said, from one month to the other, we saw a 41% decrease in our data integrity. We're also working on the systems. because one of the points that the OEG has mentioned is that there are it's a system issues in terms that it's allowing the dates to be in non-sequence and not in order. And we have started to fix that in the fall, and we have another release coming up that will help mitigate these and lower these incidents.
Thank you very much. We'll now move back to Monsieur Lefebvre.
Just to continue on the line of questioning I was asking before, I asked as to why the increase, and again, your answers were taxpayers are more knowledgeable of their rights. You also said that basically CRA is doing a better job of identifying files in which they should be reassessing. I'll add one is basically at the audit level as well. I think from my experience in dealing with CRA, representing taxpayers that had to deal with CRA on many occasions, a lot of times it was the approach from the auditor's position. They basically would not allow a deduction, or would just basically be very hard and move it to basically say, well, take your chances at appeals. I also know tax practitioners that actually say, well, no, we're dealing with the auditor. This is an unreasonable auditor. We can't deal with this person. Just let it slide and let's go to appeals, because we may get a better discussion at that level, so let's stop wasting our time here. So my comment on that is that I think there's an opportunity here, because when we look at resources, certainly you have the appeals level, you have the appeals officers, and then we have the audit level, which is your front line. Right? They are doing the front line of that job of we're looking at all the assessments, reassessments, determining how they're going to be approaching this, and some are very capable and some are difficult, more difficult to deal with. So these new processes that you're putting in place, I'm happy to see these moving forward. But these 30 days that the agency will contact the individual. In my experience, though, is that we waited months to get an answer, or actually to get a response, and then they would give us 10 to 20 days to respond. Right? So is that culture going to remain the same as well, or how is that relationship? I know with respect to this new process. Please explain to me a bit of that new process.
Okay, well, maybe I'll take the two of them quickly.
Okay, sure.
The first that you raise is, the audit activity generating additional workload for appeals. And I think one of the things that we are trying to do is to help put the things in appeals that should be there and the things that shouldn't be in appeals not be there. So, for example, sometimes what comes into appeals is a case where then new information is provided by the taxpayer. What we'd like to do is if what you're doing is providing new information, that's not really an appeal. That's more handled better in the audit assessment activity. So we're trying to do some things so that things don't just automatically go into appeals, frankly, either by activities of CRA auditors or by the taxpayer. So let's get things separated on that front. Because that is the one thing that I've learned in a few months at the agency is that something that happens here in audit affects appeals, it affects the tax collection people. It's an integrated whole. And so we need to think about that, and we need to give feedback from our appeals officers through to the auditors about some of the cases that are coming. And I think that's one of the points that the Auditor General raised. Do we talk to each other enough to figure out how we can help the auditor? And again, going back to my earlier point, help with a respectful and productive conversation with the taxpayer.
Yes, and thank you for going there, because that's if you look at the auditor's report, this is not the first time that the Auditor General has done a review of the dispute settlement mechanism with CRA. Back in 2004, there was a report as well, and basically, I'm reading from paragraph 2.83, and basically it says, we indicated, this is the Auditor General saying, we indicated the importance of having auditors understand the changes made to their assessment. So basically, how to be better, right? Sharing best practices within the department. So basically, this was discussed back in 2004 report, and here we are in 2017. It's back in the forefront, because basically it says here, headquarters acted on some of the suggestions. Most were not addressed, nor was there a targeted timeline for their completion. That's kind of the gist of what was said there. So how can we be assured that this time things will change?
I think you can be assured because we have a system in CRA now, and I don't know what existed in 2004, where we track all of these recommendations that are given to us, and we hold assistant commissioners like Mireille and others accountable for how are you doing on that, so that if we agree to a recommendation, then we will implement it, and we will do our best job. Whether we'll do it perfectly or not remains to be seen, but we will do our best job. But on your second question...
Sure, yeah, you go back.
Yeah. So one of the things, we're trying to get back to taxpayers quickly, and we're focusing on the low complexity ones first, because that should be the place where we can make the most progress. Because what happened in the past was it would sit on a shelf until an appeals officer was ready for it. And actually, time is not our friend in that case, right? Because the longer it waits, sometimes the harder it is to resolve it quickly. So our thought, and we're having some early success with this, is to get back to the taxpayer quickly and just have a conversation to make sure, okay, we got all the information, is there anything else? So that when the appeals officer picks it up, maybe we'll be able to even just deal with it at that stage. But certainly when the appeals officer picks it up, that whole process can go a lot faster. And
I would tend to agree
we'll still
that
ask
this
the
will help.
taxpayer to be efficient.
It will help. My only, how much I'm going to have. Service standards you talked about, now you want to resolve files within 180 days. I'm assuming those are the low complexity files and not your group files.
It is.
Please, thank you, because group files take a long, long time.
Yeah. I mean, again, what we've had to do here to attack this problem is split it up into pieces, low complexity, medium, high complexity, and group. And in the low complexity, we're making the case to fix them within 180
I think
days.
that's a very enviable target. Hopefully that you'll be able to inch towards that target. Now, just to go back to the auditor's best practices and improvements, because in my dealings, again, I'll go back to my own experiences, is that sometimes you'll have a result, a completely different result between auditors on pretty much the same type of file. That's why sometimes we had to bring it up to appeals. So again, I commend you to try to make sure that you're going to improve the service standards, or at least just not at the appeals level, but at the audit level, to make sure that their training continues and basically the sharing of certain files were resolved this way, because that lack of communication has been very, very frustrating for taxpayers and tax practitioners in the industry, because it is not consistent. You know, if you can't advise clients and taxpayers saying that this is how they approach certain files, this is a result that you may get. This is extremely frustrating for taxpayers and for Canadians. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if there was a question there. I think that was more of a comment. Thank you. We'll now go back to Mr. Genereux, please, for 5 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome back as well on behalf of this side of the table. Also, thank you to the Commissioner. Again, you heard earlier that we have had some issues with basically the person in charge not showing up, and it's great to see you here. We had to send one meeting away, so I just want to get that on record that it's great to have him here. And if I can add my name quickly to the welcome to the distinguished delegation from Kenya for joining us and being here in the room. Now that I've wasted 35 seconds, I want to get a sense, you know, we have people in front of this committee all the time, as you can imagine, that Ms. Cheng and her team have gone through the books and say, you know, they're not doing this right. Then suddenly you have an action plan. Suddenly you have a path forward on how to get to that point. So I guess where I'm going with that is, how familiar are you, and you've only been there 7 months, but how familiar are you and your staff with the Taxpayer Bill of Rights?
Very familiar, yes.
Would you say which percentage of the staff that are employed under you would be aware of the Taxpayer Bill of Rights?
Well, off the top, I would have said all, and certainly everybody that I've come in contact with over this period understands that that's a part of our responsibility. So I have no reason to think that people in the agency aren't aware of it.
Okay. Because I say that because number 6 of the under the Taxpayer Bill of Rights says you have right to complete, accurate, clear, and timely information. Obviously what we're discussing today is that it's not timely information. There was a motion put forward by one of my colleagues, a private member's motion, establishing a duty of care for the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. It was subsequently voted down, but it highlighted one particular point that I'd like to read into the record. Right number 9. where it says, add the requirement that complaints to CRA service must be addressed in a timely manner. Again, there seems to be a theme that's been pushed on your department quite consistently, and yet we're now here in a position where we're supposed to trust you that your new action plan is going to get us over that hurdle. We just heard a number of complaints from my colleague earlier on that it's not there right now. So can you give us some faith that this is the time, now in 2017, we're going to get there?
I guess I can give you the assurance that I will be working as hard as I can and with the agency to get there. We have a minister who's received a mandate from the Prime Minister to provide service to Canadians in a timely manner, improve the quality of the service. Our mandate is to apply the tax system fairly, and so to have something like the objections appeals function working well is a key part of our mandate. I guess the only thing that I would say is sometimes these take longer than we would like. In the case of the appeals, we know that even having a 180-day service standard on low complexity is not where we want to be eventually, but we have to be practical and realize that we have this big inventory right now that we have to grind down. So, that will take time. And I would also say, probably with 40,000 people administering the tax system on behalf of more than 30 million Canadians, we won't be perfect. But I think that you can rest assured that within the agency, the pressure to improve service and to make sure that we're respecting the taxpayers' rights and giving the taxpayer the services they deserve is very, very important right now. And we'll be doing everything we can. The final point that I would raise is it's always resources. I guess if we had unlimited resources, we could deal with everybody's return on the minute. But we always have to balance priorities.
But on that point, if you don't mind, only because I'm limited time here, you were provided $440 million in the last budget, which was to go towards overseas tax havens, if you will. Are you insinuating that perhaps if that was better spent on some of this to be able to go after, to help out instead of going after the little guy, you're going after these big corporations? How many people could that have hired to hire people on the telephones? How many of that could have helped to go through these appeal process?
Oh, I mean, the governments make decisions about where they provide money. These are all priorities for, these are important activities that the agency uncovers. We're doing, I think, a great job with the money that we received on the offshore tax evasion. We did receive some money in the 2016 budget on the appeals function. We're trying to do the best we can with that. And going forward, we're going to have to make sure that we are nimble within the agency to make sure that we're putting resources in the right places. So that's all part of the puzzle.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. We'll now move to Mr. Area, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Hamilton, you mentioned that in 7 months you visited all regional operations, and you attest to the pride, professionalism, and commitments of 40,000 employees. Did you find any shortcomings or the flaws?
Why would you want to focus on that? No, and first off, I should say, even though I touched down in every province at least once, I didn't meet all 40,000. It's a very, very big place. So, but the people that I did meet were almost, at a people level, they were uniformly proud of what they did. They were integrated with the community. They worked together as a team. They were trying to do the best thing they could for the Canadians, the taxpayers, and for the government overall. So uniformly with the people that I met, I didn't see any examples. Would I say that in the course of that 7 months, I've seen some areas where the agency should improve? Yes. I think we should improve in the way we communicate both with each other and with Canadians. I think there's opportunities for improvement. I think there's opportunities for us to become more innovative. The world is changing, and customers, Canadians, expect us to provide them with services like they get from their bank, like they get from others. And we need to make sure that we're innovative to finding ways to do that. So I think those are some areas where I think we could improve. I mentioned, as we audit people, can we make sure that we're educating them along the way and making sure that all of those conversations are respectful conversations.
Thank you.
So that's my 7-month report.
You mentioned that your agency takes great pride in quality decisions and service to Canadians, but Auditor General's report says that 65% of the time, agency ruled in whole or in part in favor of the taxpayers. Why is that so?
It's important to understand on that 65% number that a couple of things happen when a file moves from the assessment audit to appeals. And in the cases where the appeals ruled with the taxpayer, only a small percentage of those were because the auditor was seen to have misapplied the law. There was a number of cases where new information became available. Either the taxpayer provided new information or there was information there that wasn't realized. So in a lot of those cases, it was new information coming that caused the decision to change, and that can happen. And that's part of why what we're trying to do is to make sure we deal with cases at the appropriate place, in the assessment audit place, and that only at the appeals are we looking at not new information coming, but really just revisiting the decision. So that's part of the 65%.
Thank you. You mentioned that for low complexity objections, your wish is to resolve them in 180 days, 80% of the time. But appears that currently this is being resolved in 143 days. Why? In fact, you are increasing the amount of time here?
Yeah, I think there's a question of how you measure it on average. Is it 143 days versus measuring we're going to get through 80% of them in 180 days? The factor that plays into both of those decisions, and the reason why we need a service standard of 180 days now, is the backlog. So if you took the backlog away, I think we'd be able to process these, in less than 140 days, for sure.
Ms. Chang, in your report, Exhibit 2.3, you show that the complexity of objections low. Average time to resolution is 143 days. That includes both the backlog and the current inventory?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That would be because we were looking at 5 years information up to March 2016, and at that point in time, we do not distinguish between backlog or what have you. It's all appeals that are, or objections that are in play.
So the proposed time of 180 days, do you think that is longer than what is being done now?
I think what I'm hearing from the Commissioner is that they'll start with that, but the intention is to work that number down. So certainly from our perspective, the expectation would be that that number should be quite a bit lower than the 180. This is especially in the consideration when the Commissioner is considering asking for information way earlier. So that's going to shorten the timeline. And I suspect they would be in a position to...
Just one quick question for the Commissioner.
Very quick, we have 4 seconds.
Yeah, you said that some of the group cases, I guess, it takes years because of the process involved in the courts. Are you trying to do something else with the other department to hasten up the process?
Well, I think we feel like we've already taken some actions to get that process as efficient as possible, and there's just a recognition that those are going to take a longer time. By bundling cases together and having a lead case that we go forward with that bind all the others, that's a good process. It's a lot of cases. It takes a long time, and that's why we've tried to pull apart how are we going to attack the group cases versus the low complexity. They're very different, we do, for example, I wouldn't feel comfortable giving a service standard on a group case. I wouldn't even know what to say in that case.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. We'll now move back to Mr. Genereux again.
Terrific. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just some quick facts, if we can. The 180 days, is that from the date received or the date assigned to the appeals officer?
That's from the date received, I believe.
It's from the stamp date on the
Date
objection.
Received.
No, it's not received. It's the stamp date. So when it was put in the mail. from Canada
Oh, okay.
Post.
So I submit an objection, and then from that date, when I put it in the mailbox, is when 180 days. Okay.
The key thing is it's not when it's assigned.
Right. Yeah. That's what we're looking for. And then, kind of on that theme, what % of objections are sent in by paper through Canada Post versus online?
So 35% are sent electronically, so the rest are either by fax or by mail.
Okay, so then that would also be the date, 180 days starts when I hit the submit button on my objection. Okay, perfect. Some of the we rank quite low in terms of other countries and the processes in other countries. Hoping you can comment on that again. Recognizing you've only been on your get out of jail card today is that you've only been on the job 7 months, but actually I should use the jail reference, not as anyway. Moving on, you have yeah, that's right. The processes in other countries. Can you comment on why we rank so low and how you're striving to get us better?
Yeah, and just to be clear, my goal is to not use the get out of jail. I've been here for 7 months, but I've spent a long career in the tax system. So while I may not know all of the intricacies of CRA yet, I feel like I can speak for the agency. On that issue, though, of what other jurisdictions are doing, the UK, the US, the UK is one that caught my eye about their performance seems to be much better. And so I actually had the opportunity to meet my UK colleague last month, and we've started a process where we could go and learn from them. So I don't know yet whether how much of it is they're measuring different things or what have you, but certainly to the extent that they have some best practices that we can incorporate, or they found a way to do things on a more timely basis, we are going to uncover those. And it's part of a broader effort that we have to get best practices from places like Citizenship and Immigration, which had a big backlog there. How did they do that? What did they do? And so Mireille has been talking to counterparts who, in other agencies and governments that have had backlogs, and how's the best way to attack this. So we will be uncovering some of those international best practices and incorporating them into our plan.
Okay, and well, that's good to hear, and I guess hopefully that falls along the theme of the customer service aspect too, because it seems a large part of this report is based on a lack of customer service from your agency. And again, we heard my colleague read some emails that are probably pretty stressful situations for families, and not only in his riding but across the country. So does that extend to you're looking at processes across other countries, across other agencies, extend to ensuring that there's none of this malicious aggression that appears to be a bit of a theme from the phone agents, as we've been hearing?
Yeah, I guess again I would just caution, while there may be some examples where somebody does an inappropriate thing, I think the vast majority of what we do, we're able to deal with a number of cases, 24 million calls a year. Lots of good is going on there. But we are looking at other jurisdictions. You
would recognize that I guess probably the good people aren't calling us, so we're hearing from a lot of the people who are upset.
Yeah. No, and as I said, I get reaction too, and it tends to be more the people that have a negative perception are more likely to let me know. So there is a lot of good that's going on out there. I just feel like I need to say that. But we are looking at what other jurisdictions are doing. The one example that's come to my attention in the first few months is Sweden, where they underwent an exercise that really transformed themselves from having a very negative perception among the population to a positive one. Now, I don't know everything there is to know about that, but that's an example where they did some things that worked positively for them, and there may be some things that we can do that they tried that will help us. And again, I think raising the attention and the awareness of this issue within the agency is something that we're definitely doing right now, and making sure that everybody approaches whatever issue they're working on for the agency with a service culture in mind. So, yes.
Thank you, just a little bit on that. Is there any system of grading, like comparative not to Sweden or not to, countries other than, say, the G7? Like, do we have any kind of a standard that says, in the G7 we're, in the top 3 or the bottom 2 or anything like that?
Well, one thing that I am aware of, and I can certainly go back to the agency and see if there's more. The OECD does a study on tax administration. I think it's every 2 years, but periodically, and one is coming out. And it looks at all the aspects of tax administration. How do you collect your debts, service, and it just presents what countries are doing. So it's sort of the most comprehensive view that I know of that compares different jurisdictions. And, as always going across a wide variety of countries, there's a little bit of difficulty in making direct comparisons, but it provides us an example of where we might be doing better. And we're actually using that, and we will be using other pieces of information to try to ensure that we are a world-class tax and benefit administration. That's been one of the things I've been emphasizing for the agency since I came on board. How do we ensure that we are that? And one of the ways is to look around the country through these kinds of studies to see who's doing what, how are people doing. So we had a sample of that in the appeals study that saw that in timeliness we didn't fare very well, but there are broader studies that look at other aspects of tax administration, and we'll be paying attention to that.
Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Chen, please.
Thank you very much. Coming from an education background, I want to focus on the fourth theme that the Commissioner brought up, which is learning from objections and appeal decisions. I heard from Mr. Hamilton that he outlined the 166,000 outstanding objections, 55% of which are group files that concern such disputes as tax avoidance arrangements like gifting tax arrangements. I came across an article from a CTV News report in 2014 that talks about the thousands of Canadians who have fallen victim to tax schemes run by promoters who encourage them to donate. Oftentimes these programs are sold in such a way that they lead Canadians to believe that they're doing something good to help buy medicines, for example, for people in poor countries. The article states it's all cloaked in philanthropy, but to date, nearly $6 billion worth of these donations have been denied by Canada Revenue officials. The news report continues on to say that according to the CRA, quote, to date, not a single gifting tax shelter audited has been found to comply with the Income Tax Act. And while some of these donors might have taken a calculated risk in participating in these programs, it strikes me that a lot of Canadians are participating because they've been duped. They've been told that they're doing something good for those in need. So I recognize and I do respect the Auditor General's report in that it focuses on how to resolve objections in a timely manner, but I really want to make the connection here. We're talking about learning from objections and appeal decisions. Is there room for improvement? Can we not do a better job at educating Canadians on schemes like this that then result in objections and appeals, and as you said, oftentimes having lead cases go through the courts, which can take year after year after year, clogging up our processes and the resources that your department has? Can we nip it in the bud? Can we not do a better job before all this happens to educate Canadians so that they don't fall for schemes that ultimately we know, based on past experience, will not work?
Well, I definitely think there's room for improvement on that front. And you're right in terms of the people that participate in these schemes, some knowingly, some perhaps not understanding exactly what was going on, and what can we do to make sure that people are better educated about how the tax system works. And that's why when I was talking earlier about having conversations with taxpayers, be it in an audit situation or just more generally in the information that we put out, can we do a better job of communicating what's out there, how the tax system works, what people should be thinking of and aware of? So yes, and it's not that we never have done anything in this front, but I think it's an area where hopefully we can find ways to do better, because it is an unfortunate use of resources at some point when something like this happens. Now, Mary may help me on this one, but my memory suggests the Ombudsman did some work in this donor front. Is that, or am I wrong?
I think you're right.
It's sort of a donor beware exercise that the taxpayers ombudsman undertook. So I mean, I would just offer that up as an example of some things that can be done. Don't know if you
Yeah,
have any.
So what has been done?
Well, the agency over the years have published and issued a number of communiques to try to educate taxpayers. And one of the things that the taxpayers ombudsman did in 2014 was to examine what we've done and to provide some recommendations. So in terms of how can we encourage or discourage, I should say, promoters using these arrangements from selling them, but also from the taxpayer perspective of how can we discourage them so they can actually recognize when it's too good to be true and not get involved in such interesting. And since then, there's been efforts to actually try to improve this, but as Commissioner said, there's probably more that can be done. There's also been legislative changes too that have changed the incentives for promoters, whereby when you are involved in such schemes, even though when you are in the objection phase, you still have to pay 50% of what you owe. And that has triggered or kind of, it has kind of, ça l'a découragé les gens, it discouraged people from participating. So that was one of discouraged people from participating. So that actually helped in terms of, I would say, from the other side of the equation, in terms of how they are promoted and sold to Canadians.
So,
and that's fairly recent.
Thank you, Mr. Chen. We're over already. Back to Mr. Christofferson, please.
Very good. Thanks, Chair. So I wanted to pick up on where my colleagues were on the 65%. But before I go there, I do want to revisit the comparison information that we had in our research background. It states, quote, in an international benchmarking study reported in 2011, a bit old now, but still shows the trend, the United Kingdom's tax authority, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, data from 2009 showed that among 7 countries studied, the average amount of time to resolve objections was 70 days. And in the case of Canada, it was 276 days. Now, I know you answered a question regarding this once, but I wanted to push a little harder to get a little more detail or maybe an example. Because if it was 70 days and we were maybe 100 or 85, like somewhere in the ballpark, then obviously there's some minor adjustments to be made that would get you closer to where the other countries are. But in this case, it's so vast. 70 days, 276 days. So help me, I mean, there must be 1 or 2 big pieces out of all the changes you're going to make that are going to tackle that. It just seems to me there has to be, given the distance between 70 days and 276 days. So can you just give me a couple of examples of changes we're going to make that's going to make these numbers, which are, eye-popping, change?
So at the end of my answer, you're still going to be a bit unsatisfied. So I'll commit to give you
that's status quo.
whatever I can down the road.
If I'm ever satisfied, they'll all just say we're done.
But it is something that we will get to the bottom of. So at some point, I'd be happy to furnish the committee with whatever
we may ask you to
results
do
of
that
our
anyway,
answers are. But the one thing, as I look at that, because you're right, it's not 70 versus 75.
Exactly.
It's a big gap. So what is that? How could that be? and I don't know the answers, but some things that it could be, they probably have a better process than we do, so we need to fix up our process, and we're taking some actions to have earlier interventions, and so we can get closer because of that. There is also the possibility that how that study was done, they were measuring something a little bit different in the UK case than what they're measuring here. I mean, this can happen. That could be it. They could be focusing on something in particular, or the UK tax system doesn't work
To be
the
fair,
same way
that
as
was
ours
an
does.
aggregate of 6 countries. Not just the UK. That was the aggregate of 6 countries looked at. But anyway, sorry to interrupt.
Well, I'm focusing on the UK because that was a good one.
I want to make sure you focus on the rest.
But it would apply to all the other countries as well. Their tax systems operate a little bit differently, so there might be some differences. But how all of that adds up to that difference is something that I'm certainly anxious to find out, and we have some work together with the UK
Do you have
and the
a
US.
deadline for yourself as to when you
I would
satisfied?
certainly hope in the coming couple of months we would be able to understand the calculations better, not to necessarily have fixed it, but at least we could understand why we're different, and hopefully start to draw some lessons from that.
Okay, I still got some
Thank
time,
you.
Chair?
No, you don't, but you were so kind to me earlier.
Well,
If it's a concluding comment.
You know what? I'll remain faithful to my original approach and be honest with you. No, I would be changing subject.
All right,
So
okay.
thank you, Chair. I conclude.
We will go back to TJ, Mr. Harvey. Oh, Ms. Mendez. Okay, instead of, we
Sorry.
flipped you.
You didn't want to.
Go ahead, Ms. Mendez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Je vais aller en français pour qu'on...
I'll put my question in French so that there's a bit of French at this meeting. First of all, I'd like to emphasize the fact that it is lower than 1% of all the tax returns that are result in an appeal, an audit and an appeal. So we're not talking about a major problem. A general problem, but the fact remains that this is the type of relationship that citizens have with Revenue Canada that in some cases leaves a bitter taste. It may sometimes be due to the agency or certain agents. This perception creates certain impressions, and if you've heard the debate in the House in the past weeks, you've probably heard it repeatedly maintained that the agency is far more concerned with small taxpayers than those with very large incomes and those who do the utmost to find loopholes or ways of not paying taxes. I know that the minister has also put a great deal of emphasis on this combat against tax evasion and certain types of funds that might have been created for these purposes. By combating tax evasion, this is something that we've seen when we visited the Public Accounts Committee in the UK in December. We saw that there was a great deal of concentration on this particular issue. We're not talking about tax evasion, but rather tax avoidance, which is legal. How is it possible then for us to counter this commonly held perception that it's the small taxpayers that are the ones who are harshly dealt with when others are able to get away with not paying their fair share?
Deux points importants dans ce domaine. Le premier, il est important d'avoir.
The important thing, I think, is for us to have a perspective of the number of objections that do take place. It is under 1%, and it is important for us to keep this in mind. The great majority of cases do not give rise to any objection. But when there is an objection, it is important for us to have a proper process in place. Another interesting question in the matter of tax equity and dealing with large corporations and individuals, I think it is very important for us in the system that we have in Canada, the type of self-assessment system. It is important for Canadians to have a perception that it is an equitable one, that taxes are collected, the taxes that are owed, whether it be a large corporation or a small corporation, a small business. Sometimes the process with large corporations is a very long and complicated one, but it is important for us to have good systems that do collect what is owed. So that the money in the previous budget, the budget for 2016, was a very significant amount for this particular aspect, and there's a lot of activity then taking place in collecting taxes when there is a tax avoidance abroad, and to ensure then that Canadians do feel that we do have a fair system and the taxes are collected.
Just going back to the question of what we saw in Britain when we were there, they were addressing the tax evasion issue also with the big companies that were using all sorts of very legal systems to evade. And they were linking it to tax transparency and the fact that these companies were not declaring in Britain, for example, all the massive revenues they were making around the world. And they were talking about the Googles and the Apples and the other big companies in the world, and how that is part of the huge and mass tax evasion system that allows them to bottom line, not pay much tax anywhere, not pay any income tax anywhere or business tax anywhere. So is Revenue Canada also looking at that?
It's a huge issue for us, along with the Department of Finance. The Department of Finance sets the policies, we administer it. But, we are a big part of that exercise globally. And when I was at the meeting in February, when I was talking to my UK and US colleagues, one of the big items on the agenda was that. How do we ensure that proper taxes are collected in each jurisdiction? We all face that same issue. We have it in Canada. As I mentioned, we've got a lot of activity in that domain. But it is something that we need to tackle globally. And we have the base erosion and profit shifting exercise that's taking place at the OECD and the Forum of Tax Administrators. And Revenue Canada is a very significant participant in that. In fact, we lead, in my group as the commissioner, I lead two activities. One to large international businesses, and the second is on tax capacity in developing countries. So we are playing a big role in trying to figure out how the global tax system can work better for us and for all countries.
We'll try to bring the Tax Transparency Conference here this year. Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Mendez. We'll go back to Mr. Aboutif.
Well, thank you again. Just a couple of small questions. Based on the recommendation from the Auditor General that we heard today, seems like you are up to a big job, and that could be restructuring the whole operation of CRA, or at least looking down into the overall way of business, and how you're going to improve that without having to really look at the overall operation instead of looking at certain areas, because so far we haven't seen that there is a secret recipe that you're going to come up with in order to be able to solve all these problems and move forward. And when issues get compiling one after the other, that means you're never going to be able to catch up even in a short time or maybe in the long term. And I think there seemed to be an immediate emergency call to be able to solve or to put some kind of, I call it, secret recipe or a strategy to do so. So what's on your mind since you're new to the job and you're up to the challenge?
So I'll talk about the appeals function first, where we, obviously the Auditor General came through and gave us a snapshot, and we agreed with the recommendations that were made. So we have something to do. So I outlined the more agency-wide activities that we're going to be doing, that we're going to be improving our processes, we're going to tackle the backlog, we're going to be learning from what we do. But the other thing that I didn't really mention, which is important, is Mireille has done some reorganization within her group to make sure that she and her team are well set up to deliver on this challenge that we have. So that's a part of it. And I'll have to say, again, when I met with the people in our appeals operations across the country, they're ready. They're ready to do this. Like they want to be providing this good service to Canadians. So hopefully we've given them the organizational structure to do it. We'll give them the tools to do it. We're going to get better data to be able to measure how we're doing. We're going to communicate with Canadians. People will be holding our feet to the fire. So I think we've got the pieces in place to do that. But you know, I agree with you. I've run enough organizations that I know this is a big job, and we'll have to be to stay at it, and we'll probably take a little bit longer than we like, but we're going to push it as aggressively as we can. And we do have a board of management at CRA as well that is pushing us in this domain. So I have more than enough people looking out for how well we're doing on this front I'm quite confident that we're going to see some improvements. And if people are realistic about how quickly we can actually do things, I think we'll be able to get ourselves back on track.
Another quick question. Do you have any idea on the data, what is the number in dollars of the unsettled cases that we're looking at the moment, or your agency is looking at? And you don't have, like, if
I do have that number in my, and Marie's just pointing it out. 18 billion? Yeah. The number for 2014-15 is 18 billion.
Okay. And from old files, I mean, total how much we have to deal with overall?
That's it. That's everything.
That's all the time? That's 18 billion?
Yeah.
Is that included international evasion? Yeah?
That includes international.
Go ahead. Thank you.
You just have a little more time. Maybe I'll just grab a quick question before we go back here. Ms. Cheng, and we can go back to you too, Mr. General. Ms. Cheng, you've heard very optimistic from CRA. They have all the pieces in place. They're looking to do this quickly. Are you satisfied with what you've heard today? Is there any areas of concern that you really have even after listening today?
So I would say that I'm very encouraged with what the Commissioner has been providing in his opening statement. Those seems to be the areas that we're concerned with. The communication aspect, that is very important because a lot of taxpayers are actually waiting to hear the answer, and the uncertainty really is not helpful and doesn't help with the dynamics and the trust factor. So the element of talking about managing the inventory, that's absolutely critical, because in our graphs we're starting to show, we had a graph that shows the overall change in inventory, but we also split it out into the intake and the ability to actually resolve cases. And those lines were converging, which suggests that you might be looking at another spike. So the fact that the Commissioner and the agency is going to be trying to deal with that, I think that would be important. When we look at the different sides of where some of these pressure points are coming about, a lot of it actually has to do with the information front. So we have a pie chart in there that shows that at the end of the day, a lot of times we could have resolved these things earlier if CRA has the information. So what is the problem there? Either we didn't ask for it. If we didn't ask for it, why do we wait before we ask? If we have the information and didn't look at that at the right time, then that suggests a training issue, right, an awareness and training issue, so that they can be looked at sooner. And if we're looking for the information only at the time that the appeals officer is looking at it, why didn't somebody ask for that kind of information earlier? So I think there are a lot of data in there that the agency can take a look at and use that to improve its services. So I think most of the key elements are there. We haven't had a time to obviously look at each of the elements in detail, but on the overall, I think we're quite encouraged with what we're hearing.
All right, Mr. Lefebvre, I think Mr. General had a quick one as well. So we'll go to Mr. General. All right, go ahead, Mr. General.
Thank you, Mr. Lefebvre. Just a quick question. It says in the past 10 fiscal years, the number of objections have increased by 171%, but yet staff has only increased by 14%. Have you requested in this budget a complement to bring you up to the amount that you think you need?
What I would just note, just in case you missed it, we did get money in the last budget, so that was fine. But I would say, looking at it myself, that in the past probably haven't devoted enough resources to this activity. The numbers that you quoted are the ones that I look at. How big has the workload grown? How much of the extra resources been probably could have been a bit bigger. I don't know. But there's been some reallocation within the agency to try to put more money here. We did get money in the last budget. We'll see. We'll see what the next budget holds. I certainly won't comment on that at all. But whatever happens, we need to look at this at an agency level going down the road and thinking about how we're best allocating our resources, and that's my job. It's looking at tax evasion activity, whether it's fixing our phone system, whether it's this. I mean, that'll be a part of what we need to do, and I'll be looking at it with an eye to delivering on the action plan that we have and trying to make sure that we're adequately resourced.
I tried, Mr. Chair. That's,
Mr. Lefebvre.
Merci. Encore au bureau du Vérificateur général, Madame Chair.
Once again to Ms. Cheng, the Office of the Auditor General, or Mr. Goulet. There was a comment that was made previously in 2004. An audit did take place relating to the services in Revenue Canada with respect to objections. And there was a report that came out in 2016. Can you give us any assurance then that there will not be a repetition? The question was put by the chair as well. In view of the fact that there already is a report, did you have a look at the 2004 report? Did you compare the studies? That is what happened in 2012, between 2012 and 2050. The results that actually took place and the plan that they are proposing as opposed to the previous one.
The question has to do with, since it was last looked at 2004, now rolling forward, are we seeing similar issues? The issues here has to do with the feedback loop that was being talked about, because sometimes, you know, we are getting the results of the actual objection process, and those lessons learned weren't properly captured. And we're seeing a lot of similar elements. I mean, I could ask Mr. Goulet to see if he's got additional things to say, but by and large, it's important that the assessors and the auditors get to know why were their decisions overturned so that things don't happen the same way.
Puis mon commentaire est vraiment qu'on veut pas que ça se répète encore une fois.
We don't want to see things repeating themselves in 2004. For example, this happened. Things are still happening. The measures that were put in place in 2004, are they the same as those that will be put in place Thank you for the question. What I can say, in 2004, we did make an observation. In 2012, there was an evaluation undertaken. We came to the same conclusion, and in 2050, the agency had started receiving a number of suggestions from employees in an attempt to deal with the problem. I cannot give you any assurances at the present time about whether the agency will go through with these, but like Ms. Cheng, I'm certainly very much encouraged by the steps that have been taken. And in our meetings with representatives of the agency, we did hear very positive comments to this effect. Namely, there is a recognition. It wasn't a defensive stance. There was a recognition of what is being done, and there was a commitment taken on part of the CRC to act accordingly.
I think the important point is to follow through now, right? We've heard the approach that's going to be taken. It seems to be on the right track. Yes. We're all encouraged by that. So it would be necessary to sort of see, to make sure that those actions get carried through and that indeed the inventory goes down, the rates of overturn are changing and all of that. So that would be worthwhile of another look
follow
down
up on
the
that.
road.
Perfect. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you very much. I don't have anyone else. Mr. Christofferson.
Very, very brief, if I can, Chair. Return to the issue that I had earmarked earlier, the 65%, and you answered, Mr. Hamilton, that part of that is much of that is new information that comes in, and we've heard Ms. Chang speak to the issue of, well, if it's new information, is that information that could have been or should have been anticipated as being required? What percentage, I mean, obviously you were suggesting the 65% may not be as big as it looks. So how much of it do you think can reasonably be answered away? Because it's a big number.
It's a big number, and part of what we're going to try to do is to have that information come earlier in the process. And as I said, I think it could be a combination of two factors. One, the taxpayer offering up the information at the right point in time rather than at the appeals. And secondly, us knowing that we need that information, asking the question earlier, or realizing that the information exists somewhere and doing that. But if you look at the numbers, like 32% is new facts that were not previously requested or received. So that's a big percentage. And then there's another percentage, almost 30%, not previously obvious. So what's that exactly? We're going to do some work on that. New facts previously requested but not received, that's about a quarter. So that's a pretty big chunk. And then you get to about 8% where the appeals officer felt that the auditor had misapplied the law, and that's 8%. It's still a positive number, but I think there's enough in that first three categories, that we should be able to find a better way to get the right information at the right time, and so I'm quite hopeful on that.
That's great. I mean, that makes common sense. I realize that there's answers that are technical that we don't all, but that makes a lot of common sense to identify information that we can be asking people up front that you're going to ask them anyway, and to do it in a way that allows them to have the shortest amount of time. If I can, one more quick one. Ms. Chang, you mentioned in your opening remarks, I'm going to ask you just to expand on it, and that'll be my last question. But in paragraph 10 of your opening remarks, you say that we also examined Canada Revenue Agency's performance targets for the objection process and found that the agency did not consider timeliness from the point of view of the taxpayer. Now, we know on previous occasions, Mr. Ferguson has made a big issue out of the fact that things get measured and inside departments, and they feel real good about themselves because that measurement looks good, but not taking into account the common sense question, which is how long did it take for the taxpayer? And so everything is more, when we're measuring, that we need to be measuring more those things that affect the ability of government to provide services to Canadians, and not just moving it from desk A to desk B. Just in your own words, if you could just touch on that, given the importance the Auditor General is placing on this.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as the member pointed out, this was a point that the Auditor General has made on a number of occasions. So in this particular case, what we were seeing is that the clock start ticking in terms of that performance measurement metric when the appeals officers start working on it. Didn't we say earlier, when could we actually be looking at the overall count? It should be the time when that objection was launched. So that front end, until such time that the file is assigned, was not captured as part of the performance indicators up to that point, and it shouldn't be, because then we're measuring an activity within the agency as opposed to stepping back as a taxpayer. I'm looking at it in terms of me interfacing with the agency and how long did it take for my file to be completely resolved.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I don't think there's any other questions coming from any of the members. Have you ever done an assessment as to how many of the objections that you receive are from those taxpayers that have filled out the form themselves compared to whether they've had an accountant go through it? Not to put the blame on the individual taxpayer. I know that all of us as well probably get calls from constituents concerned about the difficulty of working their way through the tax form. Can you make the tax form easier? Can it be simpler? Why do I need an accountant to do this? Has there been those kind of studies, internal studies done?
We don't have exact numbers in terms of if the objections have been filed by a representative versus a taxpayer, but we know that it's a significant portion that are actually supported or sent to us via a representative.
Okay.
And naturally, it depends on the complexity. So I said the higher it is, like in the medium and even the large one, that would be 100% with a representative.
Yeah.
And I would say probably with respect to the low complexity is probably close to half and half, depending.
Okay. How many on this tax form that'll be coming up, how many will e-file compared to the numbers that, I know this isn't specific to the audit, but just wondering, how many actually file electronically?
We expect to have over 85% people file electronically this year.
Good.
So it's been increasing over time.
Increasing, good. All right. Okay, well, I think that pretty well concludes our meeting today. I want to thank you for coming, and always good to hear from you and to hear an optimistic message. And also to our Auditor General Office, thank you for your good work as always. And we are, just before we adjourn, I will invite the committee to make their way to 410, where we will have a chance to meet the Kenyan representation and their committee, as well as we want to get some kind of a formal picture with them. So, you know, straighten out your tie. They look pretty sharp back there. Want to make sure that we look sharp as well. So thank you for attending, and we are now adjourned.